Okay, so I'm John Marshall,
I'm Cezanne Charles.
and together we're Root of Two, and we've got the Weather Vanes project. The Neurotic Early Worrying System is our subtitle, which is it's NEWS, and that's really kind of where we started with the project. Coming off our last project, which was really quite industrial, and we wanted to look at a more agricultural system. And on visiting farms, we were attracted to the fact that lots of barns that we were seeing had weather vanes on them. So we thought, okay, so that's an agricultural information device. So what would be an update for the 21st century for the weather vane?
So really a lot of our work is trying to sort of position things that are maybe taken for granted or reclaim and reclaim them as objects, working as designers. So as John mentioned, our previous project really dealt with kind of the post-industrial city and mid-century modernism in quite a direct way, focused around sustainability. And this one, because we're based in Detroit, we were really looking at how we're seeing kind of the collision of the 21st century values as well as kind of values from previous centuries, really looking at embracing of urban agriculture, more cottage-based industries, more individual entrepreneurialism, and how do you then sort of reclaim those devices in ways that make sense within a 21st century context. So one of the things that is apparent when you look at a weather vane from a very certain view, you see the ordinals of north, south, east, and west. And when you see them, they actually kind of form the news. So it occurred to us that what would be really great is if we tied a 21st century weather vane into the news system, and specifically to try and understand the kind of climate of fear that we kept feeling like was being perpetuated within the media. So that's kind of where we started with the project.
Yeah, so what the system actually does is it actually subscribes to Reuters news feeds, so it takes a feed in, and so as journalists around the world are submitting their stories, the chicken system is actually looking at where the story is coming from, what the story is, and it's looking for keywords. So we started off with the Homeland Security social media list, which is actually a bunch of words where if you use them in social media, then a computer somewhere will come and look at it and try and triangulate different things. And if there are too many hits on those words, then you're going to get investigated. But so that was our starting point. But we're able to determine the distance of the story, where the event has happened from Folkestone, and that gives us a distance. We're also, based on the number of hits we get with those words, that gives us we call it the threat level, what the danger is. Mm-hmm. So we've got danger over distance as one of the components.
Yeah, and so one of the things that we were really keen to do right away was to move on from just this kind of core database of keywords from the social media monitoring toolkit and really kind of open that up to a wider conversation about like what people in Folkestone were particularly interested in and what some of their concerns were. So we were here last December doing a series of workshops with both youth and other members of the community. And, instead of asking a very direct question like, what are you afraid of? Because I think, that kind of stymies conversation a little bit. We instead engaged them in a workshop around making prototypes and smaller versions of it. So really kind of hands-on interactive, gave them a presentation about what the larger themes of the work were about, but then kind of said about just, making together. And within that context, people tend to open up and tend to share. So we heard some really fantastic things from the community members about what some of the local issues were. And so all of those then also formed part of the keyword database. And so we have about 726 keywords altogether. We also went back and really looked at kind of different news outlets and different media outlets and some of the reporting that was going on both locally and kind of internationally to make sure we were pulling kind of really current keywords. So that is how our system parses the data. And then the way that you begin to read the news, because ultimately the project is a data visualization project, The way you begin to read the news through our system is you'll be able to see it rotate the number of times to determine the threat level. So if it rotates once, it's a pretty low threat level story. If it rotates twice, then it kind of continues up, using, again, the Homeland Security kind of 5-system threat level that we hear about in airports. So, we go from low to guarded to elevated to high to severe. And then at night, you'll also be able to see that change in color as well. So you'll not just see the rotation, but you also see the color system too.
And the systems, the electronics and the mechanics of the system are identical for each site, but what is different is the database on each of the 5 sites. The scoring for each of the keywords is slightly different. And whereas we came back in and we looked at some demographic information, and we looked at what's the most popular newspaper in this postcode. We looked at that, and so we've actually sort of weighted the terms based on where in Folkestone they are. So obviously someone out on the east end might respond differently from someone here living around the cube. So the chickens will respond, based loosely on the demographic of the people living in the local community.
There is another element to the story, though, I should say, which is all of our previous projects have been very responsive and very interactive. And so the challenge with public art, especially pieces that are on tall buildings, is how do you make a system participative? And it's really important for us that people are able to not just have their information that we took from them be part of the system, but that then there's a situation where they can then come back and participate and have their say. And so you're able to actually tweet into the system at Wither Veins. If you tweet either keep calm or sky falling with the hashtags, you'll actually be able to influence the system's overall ambient fear level. So again, it's one of these kind of notions of every individual acts on their own to make their choice as to determine what their tweets are, but it's only in aggregate that you're able to actually affect the fear level. So it takes about 22 tweets in order to actually change 1 degree higher or lower what the fear is in the system. And for those that are not on Twitter, you can actually go to witherveins.com and actually participate as well. So we really wanted to make sure that there was an ongoing way that people could feed back into the system.
Mm-hmm.